Hey guys, Dan here with your TV news and reviews for the week. This is episode number 2 that we're doing here on the channel of the TV news and reviews with the fall season ramping up for new TV series and of course returning favorites. I thought, you know what, I am a TV fanatic at heart. Let's do a weekly rundown of what's going on. So we'll talk about a little news, get my take on that, and then into the review section. So we have a few things to talk about in the news, including this dude, Shane Gillis, who just got hired and then fired from Saturday Night Live within a matter of a couple days. So that's been real big in the news lately. Also, new streaming stuff has been announced, with NBC Universal finally giving us some details on their new streaming platform, and then also Apple Plus TV, or Apple TV Plus, I guess it's called, also giving us some news about their new streaming service as well. So a bunch of stuff to tackle there, and some little news items as well. And then for your reviews, none of the network shows have been on yet. They're going to start next week. I know I've been seeing commercials for Mixed-ish on ABC, so I know that's starting next week, and I know there's a handful of others. So obviously as the next 2 to 3 weeks happen, we're going to have a lot of new fall shows to tackle. So I went a little retro with one of our picks this week, and then we have a couple of talk shows to discuss, and then 2 streaming series as well. One which is definitely a mini-series and not, will not be getting a second season or anything, and then the other sort of up in the air. It could kind of go either way. You could certainly end it as a mini-series, but I could see it getting a season 2 as well, and that is BH90210 is the first one. That's the sort of retro one. Now that all the episodes of that have aired, I thought, let's take a look back at that and see if it was any good. I know there was a lot of talk about that before I ever even saw any of the episodes. And then on Netflix, you've got this miniseries called Unbelievable, starring Toni Collette and Caitlin Dever. And then Undone on Amazon, which is this really cool rotoscope animated series kind of thing. We'll get into that. And then 2 new talk shows. One that I briefly mentioned last week that I wanted to see a second episode of before I gave a proper review, and that's Good Talk with Anthony Jeselnik on Comedy Central. And then also we're going to talk about A Little Late with Lilly Singh, which is the new late night show after Seth Meyers on NBC. So we're going to tackle all of that. First, let's get into the news. The first couple of news items I have is more sort of little fluffy news pieces, but one of them is the ABC announcement of this Cast from the Past week, which is going to be the second week of October. It starts October 7th and is going to run pretty much the whole week through a lot of their shows. They've gotten a lot of their popular, mostly sitcoms, but there's some dramas in the mix too, to get some re-teamings together, maybe some new casts entirely together, or not new casts, but some old casts that really have nothing to do with the show, but they just wanted to see them together. So the reason I sort of was looking into this was because somebody posted on my Facebook about a Girlfriends reunion on Blackish, because of course Tracy Ellis Ross is the star of that show, and she also starred on Girlfriends. So her girlfriend buddies will be on the Blackish show that week. I'm not sure what exactly they're playing. I think it was announced on one of the sites I saw, but I don't see it here on this one. But yeah, Golden Brooks, Joe Marie Jones, and Persia White are going to be appearing on Blackish that week. I gotta say, I really enjoy the show Girlfriends. I haven't seen a ton of them, but when it went into syndication, I watched a few episodes. The thing that struck me the most was that Kelsey Grammer was the executive producer of it, because it just seemed like such an African American based show, and Kelsey Grammer I think is just one of the whitest, right? So I thought that was interesting, but I thought it was cool that he was kind of branching out in that way, and I don't know, the proof was in the pudding, because I thought it was a great show, so I'm excited to see that. But then, in addition, that's sort of what got the ball rolling for me in looking at all of this, and I was like, oh my god, they're doing a whole week of stunt casting. So you've got, this isn't all of them, but just some of them. So Dan Aykroyd is going to be on the third episode of the season of The Connors, which reteams him with John Goodman. They were in Blues Brothers 2000 together, which of course, wasn't that great a movie, but we love Dan Aykroyd, and seeing him with John Goodman again is going to be great. So that's happening. I don't watch American Housewife. I had watched the first couple episodes, but Diedrich Bader is on that show from the Drew Carey show, and so there's going to be actually a Drew Carey reunion that week on American Housewife, including Drew Carey, Kathy Kinney, and Ryan Stiles. So I think I'll actually watch that episode because that sounds fun. And then Cheers. By the way, I didn't even think of this when I wore my Cheers shirt today, but maybe subconsciously. But so Cheers, Kirstie Alley, Rhea Perlman, George Wendt, and John Ratzenberger are all going to reunite on the Goldbergs, which of course nobody from the Goldbergs was on Cheers, but it takes place in the 80s, so of course they do a lot of 80s sort of stunt casting in that fashion. So that's going to be awesome. I mean, I love the Goldbergs. I watch every episode anyway, but I'm definitely going to be there for that one. And then there's a few other things. Alyssa Milano and Holly Marie Combs from Charmed are going to be on the same show together. Grey's Anatomy, which it has nothing to do with Charmed, but I guess one of the executive producers was a writer on Charmed, so he got that together. So if you like Charmed, that might be cool. Some people from Castle are showing up on Nathan Fillion's new show, The Rookie. So bunch of stunt casting that week on Cast from the Past. I think that is really cool. I love it when they do that sort of stunt casting type things. And also, they announced that there was going to be more versions of the live in front of a studio audience thing they did with Jimmy Kimmel earlier this year when they did All in the Family and the Jeffersons, but with new actors. They did, like, Woody Harrelson was Archie Bunker, and then Jamie Foxx was George Jefferson, and Wanda Sykes was Wheezy, and all that stuff. So they've announced that they're going to do a couple more of those in the next year or so, one in the winter and one in the spring. So I'm excited for that because I loved those shows when they aired the live from the studio audience earlier this year. I thought the casting was fantastic, but I don't know really any more details about that. But I think I always like as long as the stunt casting makes sense. Like, for example, when Gary Marshall died, The Odd Couple was in new episodes, the newest version with Matthew Perry, and Gary Marshall had played on that show, and he, of course, was instrumental in creating the original with Neil Simon. So they had, like, Penny Marshall, who unfortunately just recently passed, but Penny Marshall was on it. I believe Cindy Williams as well, and Pam Dauber from Mork and Mindy. Like, all these shows Gary Marshall, created or had, producership on, all got together, and I thought that was really cool, So as long as it's done right, I really enjoy stunt casting. I remember in Spin City, Meredith Baxter Burney would come on as Michael J. Fox's mother, and of course she was his mom in Family Ties. Like, I love that kind of stuff. So hopefully the cast from the past week works out. So up next, I want to talk about The Office. As popular as ever, right? Everybody loves The Office still because of Netflix. But I believe a reunion is sort of being quelled by the day. They're like, no, we're not going to do that. Steve Carell specifically has kind of said, yeah, we're out on that. But for all you Office fans out there, this might be interesting. Jenna Fisher, who of course played Pam, and Angela Martin, who played Angela, both on all 9 seasons of The Office, are going to start doing a podcast looking back on every episode of The Office. I'm not sure if they're going in order. That would make sense, but you never know. But I guess they're going to tackle sort of behind-the-scenes stuff with the episodes, maybe reviewing them. I don't know, but it's going to be called... does it say what it's called? I don't know. But it's called The Office Ladies, and it's going to premiere in October. So that is going to be really fun to listen to. I love when people do that, like, from their own shows, kind of look back on that. And I love that, look, not that these people have become, Steve Carell level stars or John Krasinski level stars, but I love that, they're able to kind of look back at that and be like, yeah, even though that got us to the dance, and it's probably mostly what we'll be known for the rest of our lives, that's okay. And I really like that. Now, side note, I liked the Jenna Fisher show, Splitting Up Together, that just recently got canceled on ABC. So she did that. And, Angela Kinsey's been doing, different stand-up shows and that kind of thing for a while now. And she appeared in, like, that Netflix show, Haters Back Off. And so, that they're still doing stuff, but I think that's really cool, that they're going to be doing that. So, no news there. I just wanted to, no commentary there, I should say, but I just wanted to talk about that news. Okay, so here's sort of the next sort of thing I want to talk about. So the next couple of bits of news I do want to comment on. But so the Shane Gillis thing, he was hired and then within a couple of days fired from SNL for the new season because these racist routines of his went online or found somehow. And I think the main reason I want to comment about this is because this dude is local. He is from Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, or at least that's where he lives recently. I don't know if he's from here or not, but I'm from Harrisburg, and Mechanicsburg is like literally across the river. It's like 15 minutes away. So when I heard that he was going to be on SNL, I was like, oh my god, this is so cool, like Central PA represent. And then within like a day, all the news was like, maybe not, because he said, these sort of racist jokes about Asians at this, at the stand-up gig or whatever. And I don't know him, but I know people that know him. I know one of the guys who knows him actually did his headshots. They may even been the headshots that he presented to SNL. I don't know, but shout out to ER Photos. And then one of my other friends works, or used to work, at one of the comedy clubs around here, and so he had met Shane from there. And, they both had said, oh, he's a really nice guy, this and that. And that may well be true. It's, I don't know him, so I don't know. But the things that he said on stage were not great. And not only were they just lazy jokes and not funny, but they were pretty racist. And I'd also heard, sort of in delving a little deeper, that one of the Philly comedy clubs had banned him for being homophobic and sexist and racist, both on and off the stage. So you never like to hear that. But the interesting thing about the specific racist joke that he told is that it was about Asian Americans, and one of the other three, there were three new hires this year on SNL, and one of them, Bowen Yang, is Asian, and he was a writer on SNL, and now he's going to move up to repertory player. And it's SNL's first ever Asian American full-time cast member. And it's like, so obviously they had to treat this very delicately, and they have a little bit of a history of race issues. You might remember years ago, but not that many, maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, there were no black women on SNL, and Lorne had said something like, oh, well, we just didn't find any that were ready or whatever. So, that's when Sashir Zameda got the job and Leslie Jones got the job and all that. So, diversity has been a little bit of an issue at SNL pretty much forever, I think you could say. So, obviously, I think Lorne did the right thing here. Shane gave some sort of half-hearted tweet about, well, I think it's ridiculous that comedians even have to defend themselves these days, but okay, it was a joke. Maybe it missed the mark, but I don't feel like I'm this kind of person. And then at the end, he thanked SNL for the opportunity and this and that. And then he said, I was always a Mad TV guy anyway, which to me, I think was supposed to be a joke, but it seemed like sour grapes to me. And if that's sort of his idea of a joke, I don't think it's very funny. But with this whole thing, there have been a few people that have come to Shane's defense. David Spade runs a late night show on Comedy Central, and he had Bill Burr and Jim Jeffries on, and they were talking about it and saying, well, I think it's ridiculous, that we're, looking back 10, 15 years at these people's routines and nitpicking something he might have said way back when. Da, 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 da. First of all, they don't know what they're talking about, because this was a fairly recent video. It wasn't from 10 or 15 years ago, so let's make that clear. But David Spade, of course, having come from SNL, was saying, yeah, they didn't really look back at our history to see what they could fire us for before we got on the show. And Rob Schneider, another SNL alum, sort of came to Shane's defense as well and said, look, this happens, these are jokes, this, that, and the other thing. So here's what I want to say about this. And it's so weird because I just, in the first news and review show, I discussed the Dave Chappelle stand-up special that's getting all this criticism. I think there's a place for every kind of joke, right? As a gay person, I don't hate a gay joke if it's funny. I think certain stereotypes exist for a reason and what have you. Is it fair that only Will and Grace can make fun of gay people? No, I don't think that's fair. So I don't mind a gay joke, but here's the problem. The language that Shane was using in the routine in question is, very insensitive racially. And as a gay person, I can take a gay joke, but the second I hear the word faggot come out of your mouth, I'm done. I'm out. The end. And I can't imagine that Asian Americans feel any differently when they hear, racial epithets about them. So not only did I think the joke was unfunny that he told, but it was so off the mark of what a comedian in 2019 should be doing. If you're going to be edgy, that's fine, but you got to use, proper language and just be conscious of things, and I think it's interesting that the only 4 people I've seen really come to Shane's defense are straight white men. Maybe that's just me, but I just find it odd, because you had some Asian actors and actresses saying, good on SNL for firing him, because he does seem like a racist and this and that. And look, again, maybe he is, maybe he's not. I don't know. I don't know the guy. But if you're going to be that type of an edgy comic, you have to expect that you're not going to fit in on NBC's flagship comedy show. My guess would be they get a higher rating for SNL than any other comedy show on their network, including The Tonight Show, including, I don't know what even their top comedy is, Superstore maybe, or Good Place. So I think it would be silly for Shane to have expected to get on the show and stay on the show if that's his comedy stance. And, look, if he wants to be the shock comic, that's fine. Go for it, but you have to expect some fallout, is my opinion on that. So, okay. Next is the Peacock and Apple TV Plus streaming platforms. Now, Peacock, of course, is NBC's, as you can imagine, NBC Universal. They announced that they were going to do one a while ago because that's sort of why The Office is getting pulled from Netflix next year, which, of course, had everybody up in arms to go back to talking about The Office. But because that's an NBC Universal property. So NBC has announced that this Peacock streaming platform will premiere sometime in April 2020. We don't know a specific date. We don't know a specific price point either. But it will be the exclusive streamer for The Office and Parks and Rec. So those things will only be available there. But then I do have a whole list of other things that will be available there. But you may be able to still find a lot of these on Hulu, Netflix, Amazon, what have you, or maybe even Apple TV Plus. But they're going to have Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Cheers, Downton Abbey, Friday Night Lights, 30 Rock, Bates Motel, Battlestar Galactica, Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I already said that one. I don't know why that's listed twice. Everybody Loves Raymond, one of my favorites. Frasier, Keeping Up with the Kardashians, because that's on Bravo, which is owned by NBC. King of Queens, Married with Children, Parenthood, all the USA stuff. Monk, Psych, Royal Pains, and then Superstore, Real Housewives, Will and Grace, and Saturday Night Live. So, a lot of that stuff will still be available on other streamers as well, but NBC Universal will have all that stuff at their disposal. And then, of course, the movies. Universal has a wide list of movies. They've been in business for 100 years. So they're going to have everything from Aaron Brockovich to American Pie, to Bridesmaids, to Brokeback Mountain, to E.T., The Breakfast Club, Despicable Me, Mamma Mia, Field of Dreams, all of that stuff, plus probably hundreds of others. So that's going to be cool. We'll see how it goes. I mean, they've announced some original programming as well, as has Apple TV Plus. I'll get into that in a second. But some of the original stuff that the Peacock app is looking at is a Battlestar Galactica reboot from the people that bring you Mr. Robot. Something called Dr. Death, which is a podcast I'm not familiar with, but it's going to star Alec Baldwin and Christian Slater. So they've got that. There is an adult drama called One of Us is Lying, which was going to be on E, and now they're going to put that on the Peacock. What else? There is a weekly late night show about Amber Ruffin. I don't know who that is, but I'm sure she's great. And then a bunch of other things that I don't know. People I'm not familiar with or whatever. Ed Helms has a new show on there called Rutherford Falls. But I think that the biggest two things kind of being bandied about the last couple days, well, Battlestar Galactica, I guess, but there's no details really on that yet. But one is a Punky Brewster reboot, which will see Soleil Moon Frye reprise the role of Punky as a single mom of 3, and she finds a young girl not unlike her former Punky self, and I guess hilarity ensues, I don't know. But it's going to be a multi-camera TV show, which will be interesting. I haven't watched Punky Brewster in probably 25 plus years. I think I may have a DVD of it, maybe season 1, or maybe it's like that. I think it might be like a best of where it's like just 20 random episodes or whatever. But I should watch that again to see if it holds up at all. But I was a young kid when Punky Brewster was originally on. You know, I was in my single digits, probably 7, 8, 9 years old, and I loved it, and I liked the cartoon and all of that. So I would certainly be interested in a reboot of that. I think for people of my age demographic, even if they haven't seen Punky Brewster in 30 years, they have very fond memories of watching that show. And I thought Soleil Moon Frye was hilarious on Sabrina the Teenage Witch as well. So, it'd be nice to get her back. But then the real big one is Saved by the Bell. They're talking about a reboot that's going to be strictly for this Peacock platform. And I do have, I think, some details on that. So here's the theme of the show, right? When California Governor Zach Morris gets into hot water for closing too many low-income high schools, he proposes that they send the affected students to the highest performing in the state, which includes Bayside High. Mario Lopez and Elizabeth Berkley are going to star in this. Now, Paul Gosselaar, who, of course, played Zach Morris in the original, is going to be the dad on Mixed-ish. So he's already got a commitment there. My guess is he'll probably pop in on Saved by the Bell from time to time, but it seems like it's going to be A.C. Slater and Elizabeth Berkley's character. And I guess they're married. I think I read that in a different article. They're going to be married in the new series. So Jessie Spano. Had a brain fart on her name. But so, that could be interesting. In all honesty, I have always found Saved by the Bell very corny. I did watch a lot of it. I can't deny that. I've probably seen at least half the episodes. I wasn't like a fanatic like some people, but I've certainly seen at least half the episodes, some of them more than once. But I think, this is right in that wheelhouse that people are looking for right now. The late 80s to mid 90s sort of stuff. Which actually will bring us into the BH90210 review in a moment. But before we do that, I do want to get to some of the Apple Plus stuff, Apple TV Plus, because that is going up basically against the Disney Plus thing, because it's starting the same month. It's going to start November 1st, which is just a few weeks before the Disney Plus streamer goes up, and it's only going to be $5 a month, which is a few dollars cheaper than Disney Plus. Now, obviously, they're not going to have the same cachet or the same catalog of films and TV shows. That's just a no-brainer. But they're going to try, And they've announced a few things. They have a Snoopy thing called Snoopy in Space. They're going to reboot Ghost Rider, which, again, here we go with the early to mid-90s stuff. Doing very well. Ghost Rider was a little bit past my time. I was in high school by the time that came around. But I remember my little brothers watching it. And it seemed like a really good show. It seemed like a fun show with the kids solving the mystery and all. And what else? Jason Momoa has a sci-fi drama on there called SEE. So that could be very big. You know, Jason Momoa obviously is huge right now. And then they're going to have some educational show called Helpsters, which probably is some sort of PBS-ish type show. So that could be very interesting. And I believe they also have something with Sesame Street going on with Apple Plus. I can't find it in this particular article, but I know I read an article. Yeah, here we go. There's a series of from Sesame Street Workshop, and then a revival of the Oprah Book Club, which that's always huge too. So I think Apple TV Plus and Disney Plus are probably going after different demos. I think Apple TV Plus, while having some family stuff in the pipeline, is going a little more for adults with the Oprah thing and the Jason Momoa thing. And obviously Disney's going more for kids and families. But it'll be interesting. I mean, it's getting to the crazy point of like, what, am I paying as much for all of these different things as I pay for cable? I don't know. I mean, I have a Netflix that I pay for. I get my Hulu for free through Sprint, so I don't pay for that. And then I have the CBS All Access, so that's what I pay for right now. Oh, and I have Amazon Prime, but I never think of that as like a streaming service because I would have Amazon Prime regardless just because of the free shipping. So I don't really count that as paying for a streaming service, but it is one that obviously I do pay for, so I guess there's that. But I don't know. I think it's all interesting, but at some point I think I'm going to have to join the club of like, getting together with friends and saying, okay, well, you pay for this, and I'll take your password and then I'll pay for that and give you my password and all that stuff because it's definitely getting a little ridiculous. And I'm so old school with Netflix, by the way. I still get the DVDs by mail. I don't get them very much. I probably should cancel it because I think I only utilize it like 3 or 4 times a year. And then I keep the discs for like 5 months and then send them back. So my Netflix is higher than most. I think it might be $25. But again, the Hulu's for free, so that's nice. I already bought into Disney Plus because Labor Day they were running like the sale where if you buy 3 years at a time, you get a third off the price or whatever. So locked into Disney Plus till 2022, I guess. So I'm going to be on board for that. So yeah, it's definitely getting a bit crazy. But I haven't had cable in 4 or 5 years, and I really don't miss it at all between all the streaming sites and then everything in the archives here behind me, and which by the way goes all the way around the basement. I will give you guys a tour of that someday, I promise. I know I keep talking about it. But so, I mean, at my place, there's always something to watch, whether it's streaming or, on a DVD. So, but yeah, price-wise, it is getting a little bit crazy. I didn't really hear anything on the Peacock platform that I'm like, oh, I gotta have that, except maybe the Punky Brewster thing, but I'm not going to pay whatever it's, $7, $8 a month just to watch the Punky Brewster reboot. Because most of the NBC Universal shows I already have on DVD. So that one I'll definitely have to think about. Same with Apple TV, even for $5 a month. Is there anything on there yet that I've really heard that I'm like, oh, I gotta check that out? I don't know. But okay, so that is the news portion. Let's move into the review portion. And we're going to start off with BH90210. Start off with a fun one, and since we were just talking about all the nostalgia stuff, that kind of fits right in. So this is in the very wheelhouse of the time frame that people want to have reboots from. It started in the the 89-90 TV season, or maybe it was a summer series in 1990. However it started. I was there from the beginning. I was just entering high school. Maybe I was in 8th grade, I guess, when it started. And, me and it was a family show for us. It was one of the things. Now, we only had, I think, 2 TVs in the house. So a lot of primetime stuff was family stuff. But, I mean, my parents as well were in on 90210, especially my mom. But we all watched it as a family for 4 or 5 seasons. We saw Brenda come and go. We saw, Tiffany Amber Thiessen show up. We saw, Donna Martin graduates, all that kind of stuff. And then in college, I sort of lost it a little bit. I know my little brother was still watching it for a couple of years, but then when he went to college, I think he kind of passed out on it as well. But we had some good times with 90210. I can't deny that. Now, I have gone back and watched a couple of the original episodes. I think probably only from the first season, about 4 years ago, maybe. And they were rough. The acting was terrible. It was rough. So I'm not one of these people who obsessively, will go back and watch episode after episode over again of 90210. It had its place for me in the 90s, and I loved it. But let's move on. And so we have, with this new series, BH90210, and basically the entire youth cast is back in it. Obviously, Luke Perry, God rest his soul, is, he wouldn't have been in it anyway because he was doing Riverdale when he passed earlier this year. So I'm sure he probably would have made an appearance in the new series, maybe, but he was not signed on the way everybody else was. So it's Gabrielle Carteris, it's Shannon Doherty, it's Jason Priestley, Ian Ziering, and then Brian Austin Green. And then the two that sort of made it all happen are Tori Spelling and Jenny Garth. They sort of got the ball rolling and get a creator title even for the reboot. So I decided I'm still kind of behind on TV. I'm like 6 to 8 months behind on my seasons and everything, just because there's so much on, and I try to keep up with movies and whatever. So I did not see this until this week. What I did was, I don't usually binge. I'm not a binger. But for you guys, I've actually binged all 3 of the the series that we're going to review today. Because I wanted to give it, an honest take. Now, for these new series in the fall on the networks, obviously they only come out one every week, so I'll only really be able to review the first episode, or maybe the first 2 if I don't really get a good feel for the first episode. I'll wait a week to review it. But when this first came on a few weeks ago, my Facebook post was just littered with people saying, like, what's going on? What the hell is this show? I don't get it. And I had read before it aired that it wasn't going to be a traditional reboot. It wasn't going to be the cast playing their old parts in an updated version. I had read that it was going to be sort of a hybrid, sort of like, Matt LeBlanc's episodes meets maybe a little Curb Your Enthusiasm. Basically, the stars are playing themselves and are trying to bring a new reboot to Fox. Is the conceit of the show. So everybody's playing themselves, but in a slightly heightened version. Like, for example, Brian Austin Green in real life is married to Megan Fox. We know that. In this show, he's married to some singer played by Lala Anthony. But sort of, same concepts. Jenny Garth, they poke fun at her many failed marriages. Tori Spelling, they sort of poke fun at her losing out on her father's fortune when he passed away, which happened in real life, and her being sort of a reality star with her husband, which in real life is called Dean. Here he's called, I don't even remember, Rick or something. But same sort of thing. And she has 5 kids. In real life, she has 6 kids on 90210. Whatever. But they're playing themselves in sort of heightened versions. And so I think if you didn't know that going into it, I think you'd be like, yeah, what the hell's going on? I don't get this. Especially because the opening scene is them at the Peach Pit as their old characters, but it turns out that's a dream. Which actually every episode of the series opens up with a dream from one of the characters in their old sort of 90210 days. So that's the basic premise. I watched all 6 episodes of this show at once, which it just wrapped up last week. So, I mean, it's freshly finished. But the first episode I had to kind of scrounge around to find because it's not on Hulu. This is one of those shows where they only have the most recent 5 episodes on Hulu, so I watched episodes 2 through 6 that way, and I had to sort of go another way to find the pilot. But overall, I have to say I really enjoyed it. I think if they did it as a regular reboot where they're just playing their own characters, I think it would have been kind of tired. Not to mention redundant, because the CW did a reboot of 90210 where Jenny Garth and Shannon Doherty played their old characters. I didn't watch it, but as far as I know, they were working at the school, or maybe one of them was the principal, one of them was the teacher, whatever it was. But so they sort of already did that. So I like the concept. I have to say that. Does it always work? No. Does it have some missteps? Yes. Is the comedy it's sort of a comedy drama hybrid? The comedy doesn't quite land. Although I don't towards the end, the episode 5 and 6 where it gets a little more outlandish. I liked it more. I liked it originally too, but the comedy worked for me better in those last couple episodes, I should say. I think Jenny Garth is a very gifted comedic actress. We don't see that a lot, but she was in that What I Like About You show with Amanda Bynes years ago, and I always enjoyed that. The surprise for me was Gabrielle Carteris. I have always found her likable. I watched her talk show when it was on. We talked about that last week with the Kelly Clarkson talk show. I watched the Gabrielle show in the mid-90s when she did that. And she's always been likable. Here, her character is bisexual and is really rooting for the Andrea character on the reboot to be also bisexual and exploring her sexuality. I thought that was a cool wrinkle. But I think she got pretty funny as the episodes went on too. But what I like about this the most is sort of what I like about, to again talk about something we talked about last week, the Brady Bunch movie, which is it's sort of a reboot, but it's an homage. But it's also it's a parody of The Thing, but it's also The Thing. And that's what I found about this, and I think that's what they were going for. I think they were going for, some tongue-in-cheek stuff, but also let's throw in a little bit of, drama 90210 style within the show. So, for example, there's sort of a stalker out there that we don't know who it is, and are they trying to sabotage 90210 reboot? Are they trying to sabotage Fox? Are they trying to sabotage Tori Spelling? So that was interesting. Then, Brian Austin Green has a son that he learns about and then is dealing with his girlfriend or his wife with that. And so it's there's all these plot lines that would have fit in perfectly with the original 90210, but they're happening to the real actors rather than, their characters. It's happening to Tori Spelling and not Donna Martin. It's happening to Jason Priestley instead of Brandon Walsh. And they get in some really good cameos. In one episode, the woman that played Brandon and Brenda's mom, Carol Potter, she shows up as a therapist as herself. She was like, hey, I can work with you guys because I remember the camaraderie back then, so we can have a nice counseling session here. So that was funny. Jamie Walters showed up as himself, playing How Do You Talk to an Angel at a Dive Bar, and commenting that, 90210 ruined his career because he threw Donna down the stairs in the one episode and people thought that he really did that, not his character, Ray. And that's all true to life. I mean, that really did happen. So I love that they touched on that. I thought it was very, very tongue-in-cheek fun. I like that it was only 6 episodes. I think that was the perfect order size from Fox. I think any more and it would have overstayed its welcome. But that being said, I would be looking forward to a season 2 if they decide to do one. It's set up so that there could be one, there could not be one. It's not like there's a ton of cliffhangers. But overall, I enjoyed it, and I'm going to give BH90210 Season 1 a B+. So up next is Unbelievable, And again, this is, I don't binge, you guys, but I binged on this because I wanted to give it the full run, because it's a mini series. It's not going to be coming back for a second season. It's going to be one and done. And I mean, they may do other things in this same vein. But Unbelievable is on Netflix. It's an 8-episode miniseries, and I watched one episode the one night, and then I watched the next 7 episodes within about 6 hours the next night. So I definitely did my due diligence in binging for you, so I could give you a proper review for this show. So the basic premise is, and it's based on a true story, but the basic premise is there's a series of rapes happening in Washington, Colorado, those areas, and the main girl, who is played by Caitlin Dever, who's named Marie in the show, basically in the first episode she goes and tells people about this rape. She tells the police. She's been kind of bouncing around from foster home to foster home her whole life, so she tells a couple of her different foster parents about it. And she was charged then by the police with lying about having been raped. And so as the series continues, I don't want to give too much away, but basically Toni Collette comes in, and Merritt Weaver, or Weaver, I'm not sure, from Nurse Jackie, they come in as cops investigating other rape cases, and they find some similarities in their rape cases that may also be what happened in Marie's case as well. And so it's this just twisty, turny kind of thing. If you like the true crime kind of stuff, which I've seen some of, but I haven't been obsessed with it like some people. I haven't seen a lot of that stuff, like Making a Murderer. I didn't see. For true crime, I kind of go and gravitate more towards things I already sort of know about, like The People versus O.J. Simpson, or the Law and Order one they did with the Menendez brothers. So this is sort of new ground for me. But what I really love about this, well, okay, first of all, the acting is great. Toni Collette is, I mean, she could sing the phone book. She is such an underrated performer, I think. She is just great in everything. She's in one of my favorites called About a Boy, with Hugh Grant, which is, she plays sort of the dramatic part of the comedy movie, because she is like a drug addict, or whatever. But I mean, just going down like her list of credits, it's like, oh my god, she's done so much. But yeah, Hereditary, a horror movie from last year, which I know a lot of people were like, oh, she should have been nominated for an Oscar. I would not have hated that if she was. So that was great. And of course, Little Miss Sunshine, The Sixth Sense. So she's always great, but she is just excellent here. She's so haunting as this detective who is sort of hardened because of the nature of her work. She's a detective who specializes kind of in these rape cases. So, she's hardened, but she's also, sympathetic, and it's just, she gives a great performance. And then this Merritt Weaver, I didn't watch Nurse Jackie, so I don't really know her. I feel like I saw her in something recently. I don't know what it was, though. I looked it up, and I was like, oh, yeah. But she was in Birdman, but I don't really remember her from that. Oh, she was in Welcome to Marwen, which was that Steve Carell movie that was not great. I know what I know her from the most is The New Girl. She was in 7 episodes of New Girl. And she is fantastic here as well. I know she was nominated for, Emmys and Golden Globes for Nurse Jackie. I believe maybe she won an Emmy for it for supporting actress. But believe me, I was looking up prices for Nurse Jackie DVD sets after I watched this miniseries. She is excellent. She goes toe-to-toe with Toni Collette. And at first they clash because they're from different departments. And, they're like, hey, this is my case. Well, I'm seeing some things that maybe are similar to my case. And then, by the middle of the miniseries, probably like episode 3 or 4, they're perfectly in sync and linked up with each other and really going for the gold here and trying to solve this. And then Caitlin Dever is great too. I first saw her in Bad Teacher, and then she was in the Tim Allen show, Last Man Standing, which I honestly did used to watch back in the day. She was only on for a few seasons. I don't think she did a bunch of the episodes. Maybe I'm wrong, but okay, she was in 6 seasons, but she's not in the new Fox version of it. I guess she's just kind of recurring a little bit, but anyway, she did Booksmart earlier this year, which was a great indie comedy. If you got to see that, a lot of people talking about that, so maybe you've at least heard of it if you haven't seen it. But she is excellent as this possible rape victim, and what I like the most about it is it really goes through sort of everybody's perspective. It goes through the victim's perspective, it goes through the police perspective, it goes through the loved ones of the victim, the parents or the significant other in some cases. And we see sort of every different side of it, and how hard it is for somebody to come forward, because it's like they're being barraged by questions, not only by the cops but then by the nurse when they go to get their rape kit and all that stuff. And I think the direction of this was great. I really was sucked in. I'll tell you what, for somebody that does not binge and watching about 6 hours of this straight, because each one's about 48-50 minutes, somewhere in that range, so the last 7 episodes was about 6 hours. It sure didn't feel like it. And I wasn't really doing much else. I was doing laundry, but that's literally it. Like I was focused, on this show. It did not feel like it. So I thought the pacing of it was very good. Now, the only thing I will say about the pacing is I do think it could have probably been 6 episodes instead of 8. It didn't feel like it was crazy long, but I think story-wise, I think they could have trimmed down a little bit and made it... People don't like odd number of episodes in a season unless it's 13, but 7 episodes in a season people don't like. So either 6 or 8, so I would say 6. I think 8's a little much, but 7 is a weird number. So I think the story could have been told in 6 episodes, but I thought it was haunting. I mean, it was, and the performances are just so good. So I'm gonna give Unbelievable an A-. I do think it could have been trimmed a little bit, but again, it didn't feel long. I think just story-wise, because it started to get a little repetitive with some of the stuff, but some very powerful scenes, no doubt. So definitely recommend Unbelievable on Netflix. My next one is also a streaming show, and that is Undone. That is on Amazon Prime, and I had sort of briefly heard about this just because of the method. This is Amazon's first adult animated series. It is a drama mostly. There's some comedic elements, but it's mainly a drama. So it's not for the kiddos, and it's through this 3D rotoscoping animation, and we've seen sort of bits and pieces of things like this. The couple things I sort of came to mind with it on was that Oscar nominee a few years ago for Best Animated Film, Anomalisa, which I thought visually was really cool and great, but the story I thought lacked a lot for me personally, and I also didn't think the story lent itself to animation. When we reviewed it on my old movie review show, Film Fanatics, the one thing I said about it was, I said many things about it, but one of my big complaints was if this were a live-action movie, I just don't think I would have enjoyed it very much. Like, I think the only thing that set it apart was the animation. Here, that is not the case, but I'll get into that. So, the basic premise of Undone is, well, first of all, okay, so I binged this one as well. This one was like 22 to 24 minute episodes, though, and like Unbelievable, there are 8 of them, but I banged it all out in like 3.5 hours. So that was it's an easy watch for one thing. But here's the basic premise. So this girl, Alma Winograd Diaz, who is played by Rosa Salazar, she is basically going through this monotony of life, wondering, is this all there is? I do the same thing every single day. I wake up, I eat the same breakfast, I go to work. She's like a daycare person, a daycare monitor, or whatever you would call that. Daycare supervisor, but she's not like the boss, so I didn't want to say supervisor, but you know what I mean. She works with the kids in daycare. And she's just, this is the same. Her sister is about to get married to this guy that Alma really hates, but she's also kind of jealous, like, okay, you're getting married, I'm sort of stuck in this rut. And she has a boyfriend that she lives with and all this, but she actually ends up breaking up with him right before this event happens. But she ends up getting in this car accident where she's in a coma for a few weeks, and when she comes out of the coma, she is having these visions of her deceased father, who's played by Bob Odenkirk. I don't know if it says his name. Jacob Winograd. And her whole life, she was told, he died when she was like 9 or 10 or whatever, but she was told he was, in an accident himself, but it turns out he was murdered. And so he is now sort of in this zone to be able to tell her, through her sort of coma state, even though she's awake now, that no, I was murdered, I need your help in figuring out what happened. So she's sort of got her hands in both places, both the real world and sort of this fantastical, not really dream world, because it is a reality. It's just not the reality she knew before the coma. So anyway, it sounds very convoluted, right? But it's actually not really, and that's the beauty of it. But she basically broke up with her boyfriend before the accident, but her mind kind of reset. So she lost a lot of memories, so she doesn't know that she was broken up with. So the boyfriend kind of strings her along in that way, and she can sort of, if she, makes an error in this world, she learns how to go back into time a moment or two and come back to that point and redo it. It's a fascinating show. I thought it was just fantastic. And she's first of all no stranger to this type of thing, because she played Alita in that Alita Battle Angel movie that was out earlier this year, that visually was amazing. Story, it's kind of like Anomalisa. Story-wise, not so much. It just wasn't there for me. But I thought visually that was amazing. Here, you get the best of both. It is visually groundbreaking. I mean, it is a stunner to watch this thing. And one cool thing is Amazon put up a 3-minute sort of like making of, which personally I could have done with a whole episode length making of. Like, if there was some shows will have like an episode 0, which is sort of like a making of, or a Q&A with the director or whatever. I remember the first season of 13 Reasons Why had that on Netflix. But I could have done with a half hour of looking at how they did this, because it's so cool. And it is a beautiful, beautiful TV show. That's number one. But everybody here is great. I think Rosa Salazar, you might know her to see her, because she's been in a bunch of stuff. She was in one of the Divergent movies. She did The Maze Runner as well. She was on Parenthood for a few episodes. So I've seen her pop up in all of those things. But of course, in Alita and in this, it's not really her. But it kind of is, because it's, the way they do the rotoscoping, they take the person and then they sort of paint over them, sort of thing. So like the Bob Odenkirk character, he looks like Bob Odenkirk. And then, her boss at the daycare is David Diggs, who, by the way, I friggin' love that dude. I didn't see Hamilton. I don't know much about Hamilton other than how great it is and a lot of the songs, but he was the teacher in Wonder, which if you've never seen the movie Wonder, that is a freaking tearjerker, great movie. But he plays the teacher in that, and then he was also on a bunch of episodes of Blackish. He plays Bo's brother. So, I see so many big things in his future. Hamilton, I think, was just the beginning for him. He is excellent, and he's great in this, too. Constance Marie, our good buddy from the old George Lopez show, she plays Alma's mother. So basically, I mean, what can I even say about it without giving you spoilers? I mean, I think I've said enough about the plot, but just the thing that sets this apart from Anomalisa or Alita Battle Angel is that the story is there. It is this, not only is it groundbreaking visually, but I think it's groundbreaking just from a sci-fi sort of perspective. I think the story is outstanding, and it builds on itself. Now, like I said at the top of the show, this could easily be just a standalone, like, here's 8 episodes, enjoy them, it is what it is, the end. But I could also see them going forward with future seasons. However, I could see that going very Lost-ish, and not really connecting as much as maybe the first season or 2 did, because I loved Lost, I really did, and I was glad I was along for the ride, but I think we can all agree that the later seasons of Lost were just kind of a hot mess, and I don't think they knew where they were going with it. So I would be happy either way with Undone, because I would love to see more, but I would understand if we didn't get more at all, because that would make sense too. And from a story perspective, I think it would mostly make sense. I mean, it does end in such a way that, like, okay, you could move further with it, and I can't give spoilers, but it could also have ended right there, and I'd be fine with that too. I mean, the only complaint I guess I would have about it is that it does get a little convoluted, but it seems to explain everything it does in a reasonable fashion. Like, it's sort of anything that you think doesn't make sense, it tends to sort of pull back and explain, mostly via Bob Odenkirk's character. He's sort of the one who, the spiritual guide, if you will, and so he sort of walks with her in her journey and sort of explains things as we go. But then there's some things that even he's just like, I'm not really sure why that is, but it is, sometimes that could be considered lazy, I guess. But I think this is just such a groundbreaking show that the fact that the storyline also works out is impressive. Everybody sort of did their due diligence in getting done what needed to be done for a cohesive storyline, and then the acting is great. This Rosa Salazar, there's not a lot of jokes in this show, but there's some. She has a very, like, I don't know, sort of sarcastic sense of humor and sort of a sly wit about her, because she is, stuck in a rut, and she kind of hates her life and all of this, so, you get that sort of Daria attitude, and she pulls it off great. She's really funny in some of these scenes, even though it's not at all a comedy, but I certainly laughed, from time to time. So I can't recommend this thing enough. Again, maybe a little convoluted, and it's not going to be for everybody. I think you have to certainly be on board with the premise, but after, I would say, you probably want to watch at least 2 of them. I think if you just watch the first one, well, the first one ends with the crash, so you don't really even get half the premise if you only watch the first one. But watch the first 2, maybe even the first 3. I mean, you could watch the first 3 in an hour and like 5 minutes. So, if you don't want to make the 3-hour commitment that I did or whatever, because I do get it. I mean, look, that's why I don't usually binge, just because I'm like, time's precious, and I would rather watch 5 different shows in, 2 or 3 hours than 5 of the same show. But here was another one just like Unbelievable. Like this just flew by. I mean, this was over at the end of almost every episode. I was like, well, that's it, because it felt like 10 minutes had gone by, not 22. So generally, I don't give out A pluses for TV seasons. I can give out A pluses for particular episodes, but if you do an A plus season, that means pretty much every episode in your season's an A plus, and that's sort of ridiculous. So I don't give out A pluses for TV seasons. So I will give Undone an A, which is, the highest that I can give. But I can't recommend this show enough. I'm excited to see if anything else from the fall slate, especially on primetime television, can live up to this, because I think this was just brilliantly executed. And, before I wrap up the segment on this, I should shout out the creators behind it, because without these guys, there's nothing. It's Hisko Hulsing who directed it. He's a Dutch director, animator, and composer as well, and he's done a bunch of things that have been very widely or well received, I should say. The only thing he's done that I've heard of is the Kurt Cobain documentary Montage of Heck that HBO did, but obviously that's not a it wasn't like an animated thing, but he is just brilliant, and if you watch even in the 3 minute making of, everybody was like, oh yeah, this dude's awesome, like he's so inventive, so creative. So yeah, good on him. But yeah, I thought Undone was fantastic. So we close the news and reviews of the week with two new talk shows. One I mentioned very briefly last week, which is Good Talk with Anthony Jeselnik. It's on Friday nights on Comedy Central. Only one episode had come out by the time I did last week's show, and I wanted to give it a second episode because I wasn't quite sure how to feel about it, and I'm glad I did that. The first episode was very good in its own way, but I wanted to make sure how I felt about it. So that's the first one we're going to talk about, and the second one we're going to talk about is A Little Late with Lilly Singh, which is taking over for Late Night with Carson Daly, which I know it's so weird thinking that show was still even on, because you hadn't heard about it in 10 years. I mean, it had been on for literally, I think, 17 years, and at the same time he was doing The Voice, so he wasn't even, I think, with his kind of thing. He was sort of phoning it in. But that show in itself even, transformed over the years, because originally it was a lot like A Little Late is with Lilly Singh, which is sort of just, and it's probably in the same studio that Carson used to do it, but, this like very little studio, intimate, normal talk show type thing. And then about, I want to say like maybe 8 or 10 years ago, they switched the format of Carson Daly entirely, and it was all like out of the studio, like interview pieces. He would travel and meet this musician at this coffee shop, and the only reason I even know that is because when I was at Planet Fitness, sometimes I would go at like 1 in the morning when I was done work, and one of the TVs would inevitably be on NBC, and I'd be like, oh, Last Call is still on, so now they're touting this Little Late with Lilly Singh, which airs Monday through Fridays, or at least Monday through Thursdays. I'm not sure if it's on Friday nights, but at the 1:35 a.m. time slot. So let's break these down one by one. So Good Talk, first episode's guest was Nick Kroll. The second episode is Christian Schall. Now these are both people that Anthony Jeselnik knows. I don't know if he's worked directly with them. I know Christian Schall mentioned on her episode that she did like a comedy festival, and he was part of it. They were both part of it. Nick Kroll, they've just known, I think, over the years through stand-up and stuff. Those types of people, LA comics or whatever, sort of all run in the same circles, and New York comics run in the same circles. So, you kind of see the same people, and if you, do Comedy Central roast, then you know the people from that, whatever. So I would imagine most of these shows of his are going to be with people he at least has met before, maybe worked with. I believe episode 3 is going to be with David Spade, which, of course, as I mentioned earlier about the Shane Gillis thing, Spade has his own show on Comedy Central now, too, so they're sort of, brothers in that regard. But the format of the show is pretty simple. It's just a one-on-one sit-down with another comedian. There's no studio audience. However, you can hear the cameramen and the producers and whatnot laughing at what's being said. So, it's to me not maybe that much different from the Norm Macdonald show that was on Netflix last year. Same type of format. No studio audience, but hearty laughs from the cameramen and stuff in the studio. And then it's one guest for a half hour, same as Norm Macdonald's show. And then Norm actually had a sidekick, but Anthony doesn't. But the vibe of the two shows is very similar in the respect that the host sort of is not taking the show all that seriously, but then asks some serious questions, which I always think is like a risky proposition, because you're like, you can either go all the way and have your show be silly, or you could, have your show be, hard-hitting, questions and, hey, let's get to really know this guest and whatnot. I sort of think it's tough to toe the line and have it both ways. Norm gets away with it because we've been seeing Norm do this type of humor for 30 years. Anthony Jeselnik, I don't know. I mean, I've known him from some of the roasts. I've seen some of his stand-up stuff. I didn't watch his show from a couple of years ago. It was something offensive. So I forget what it was called, or defensive. I forget. But it was some kind of show that he had that I did not watch. So I didn't know him from that. But I think he can be a funny guy. But I think he also thinks he's a lot funnier than he is. But I think that's also part of the joke. I think that he knows that he's not as funny as he portrays, so he is, I don't know, like, he's one of these, like smart-ass comics, so he has these guests on, and then he'll ask them a question, and sometimes it'll be like an actual, let's have an interview for a couple minutes, but then sometimes it will he'll just either cut them off, or he'll just be like, there's like an overlay stamp that it says, who cares? When he asks them a question, sometimes it's like, I don't know. Like, it's really, like, kind of mean, but then these people all know him, so it's like, oh, okay, ha ha ha, that's funny, Anthony. And then, like, he plays games with them. Like, with Christian Shaw, he played a game where he would play different grunts, and she had to say whether they were from Tim Allen or whether they were from something else. One was like a bear. I don't know. I mean, I don't find that kind of thing that funny, just because I think you're trying too hard. Like, I don't know. Like, I love the Mark Maron podcast, the WTF, because I love that he just sits down with somebody for like an hour straight and asks them all these questions about their entire history. And there's some of that here about stand-ups specifically. Like, he did sort of like an agree-disagree thing with Christian Shaw, and they were going back and forth, and it was like, it's obvious from his statement which way he falls on it. And then, Christian, on a couple of occasions, disagreed with him, and he was like, oh, really? And then maybe they would delve into it for like 45 seconds, but then they would move right on to the next thing. Whereas maybe I would have liked to hear a little more of that. Like, for example, Nick Kroll, I don't know if it was the same thing. I don't know if it was an agree-disagree, but he asked Nick Kroll if he thought, music or having an instrument or singing in your stand-up act, is lazy or something, or, is the worst thing you can do or something. And I was interested in Nick Kroll's answer, but we only got a portion of it. And I do find Mark Maron does that too, because I think he's a little ADD, so I think he'll ask a question, they'll start to give an answer, but then they'll go off on a tangent, and they'll never go back to that original point. And sometimes I'll be like, oh man, I kind of wanted to hear that. So I think some of the conversation that Anthony is having is very interesting with these people. and he's saying certain things that I didn't know, maybe about their history, or about their history in stand-up or whatever. So I like that, but then I think it gets muddied down with other things, and then he'll have like a little video montage of old stand-up clips, not his own, but just from other people. And like the one in the Nick Kroll episode was like, oh, here's some timeless comedy, and it's all these routines that are like really sexist from like the 90s, and it'll come back to Anthony and he's like, oh yeah, like I told you, real timeless, whatever. Like I thought that was funny, but I don't know. I think treating your guests like garbage is never that funny. I think the one exception is probably the Between Two Ferns. But you have to be like, I don't know. I think most people are in on it, So again, with this, I think most people are probably in on it as well because they're buddies of his, but I don't think it plays as well on television as they think it does. So I'm going to give Good Talk with Anthony Jeselnik a B-. And then A Little Late with Lilly Singh is... I didn't know who this person was. I didn't know who Lilly Singh was when she was announced as the host, but she is a YouTube star and a stand-up comedian, and she is bisexual, which is, she mentions it about every 5 minutes on her show, which I get it. You're the first of all, there's no women in, the 2 episodes I've seen so far. So the first episode was Mindy Kaling was the guest. Second one was Keenan from Saturday Night Live, Keenan Thompson. And so, both people of color, much like her. And so a lot of the conversation has, certainly in that first episode with Mindy Kaling, is about, being Indian women and all of this, in the industry. And I totally get it. I mean, every single other late night talk show host is a white, straight male. We got it. The Jimmys, James Corden, Conan, Seth Meyers, all of them. Obviously not like Trevor Noah. But see, that's the thing. That's where it falls a little short for me, because she's really hammering home like, oh my God, it's so crazy there's a woman of color in late night and bisexual to boot and this and that. But it's like, okay, but, Andy Cohen has a show and he's gay. Trevor Noah obviously is a person of color. Chelsea Handler had a show for a long time. She's a woman. So I think they're hitting that a little hard. And also, she's, for somebody who I guess is a stand-up, like I said, I didn't know her, but in reading her background, I guess she's a stand-up and did a bunch of YouTube videos. She didn't really do much of a monologue the first night because it was more of a taped video clip for the intro, but she did a monologue the second night about her Indian upbringing and how she didn't know anything about sex and she wasn't taught and all of that. And it just wasn't all that funny, and her delivery wasn't all that good, I imagine she has writers on the show, so maybe if she's doing her own material, it plays a little better. I don't know. But maybe that was taken from her, one of her YouTube videos. Hard to say, but I don't know. She seemed kind of awkward with it. And then her interview skills are not that great yet. But obviously she's just starting out with that, too. I don't know, like last week we talked about the Kelly Clarkson show. Kelly Clarkson, okay, she might not be a great interviewer yet. I mean, I think she's a fine interviewer. She wasn't bad, but she gets by because A, she's been interviewed for the last 17 years by everybody. So she knows how interviews work very, very well. And I think she also has this charisma and charm about her. And again, she brings part of herself to it too. I'm a Southern girl from Texas. She brings it to her, or to the audience. And Lily's doing that as well. Hey, I'm bisexual. I'm from Canada. I'm an Indian. I'm a woman of color. This and that. And more power to her. But I think, I don't know. I think the skills need to be honed a little more for sure. Some of the interview stuff was a little interesting. But some of it was just sort of run-of-the-mill stuff. Keenan actually seemed kind of bored to be there, to be completely honest. And I've seen him on other shows, and he seems a little more lively, but I think he's kind of low-key in general. I thought her interview on Monday with Mindy Kaling was pretty great. I love Mindy. I mean, I would love to have her own talk show, but obviously she's doing so many other things. But so I think I'm also going to give A Little Late a B minus, just because I think there's probably potential there, but I think we're a little ways off of it. I think if I were grading it on these two episodes alone, it would probably be more in the C range. But look, obviously, if I looked in, once or twice a month, for the next couple years, I would think it would increase, every time. And the reason I feel like you can say that with a TV show and not a movie, oh well, I see potential here in this movie. No, the movie's already done. It's over, cut, print. Here it is. But for something like this, it's very fluid, and I think especially for something like this that's a daily, like it's not like a sitcom where they had maybe a month or more if it's the pilot to hone it and just edit it properly, write it properly. This girl's doing a half hour 4 to 5 nights a week. So I'll give her that she's probably a little nervous, and I think the stuff is going to be dialed back about her sexuality and her heritage. I think everybody needs to talk about that, but I don't think it needs to be the focus of your show. I mean, I probably mention most episodes of things on my channel that have anything to do with anybody that's gay. I probably mention that I'm gay. But when Merlin and I are sitting down and eating the potato chips and doing the taste test, I'm not like, oh, well, as a gay man, I love these fried pickled potato chips, and I feel like that's kind of what we're doing right now, but I get it. She's got to stand out from the pack because the pack is all straight white men. I totally get it, so I'm with her on that. So I do see potential here, but I think it's not quite there yet. She definitely needs to hone those interviewing skills a little better. And honestly, the comedy, I think she needs to feel more natural. I think she needs to, work on that a little bit. But I think she's likable. I think she's very likable, and I think she could be something very, very good in due time, just not quite yet. So I'm going to leave A Little Late, like I said, with a B minus, just like the Anthony Jeselnik show, but for different reasons, because I think he's honed his show and what he wants it to be. I just am not sure how well it comes across. For her, I think it's more of a let's get a little more practice in and see where it goes. All right, well, I've talked enough. That is your TV news and reviews for this week. I will be back next week. And like I said, next week we're going to start seeing some of these new primetime shows popping up. So my goal is to watch at least the pilot or premiere episode of all of the new shows and bring it to you. Won't be able to binge them like I did with Unbelievable and Undone, or even 90210 for that matter, but hopefully that pilot will give us a good taste of what's to come for each show. And like I said earlier, if I watch the pilot episode and I'm like, I'm not quite sure how I feel about this, I want to see another, then I will wait and bring you my review of the first 2 episodes. And then also next week, The Conners returns. So I will have weekly reviews of The Conners like I have been doing since the Roseanne reboot 2 years ago. So I'm excited about that. And again, Dan Aykroyd will be on in the 3rd episode. So we'll see how that all goes. Love those Conners. So I'll be back with that next week. And then another TV news and reviews next week as well. Also, we've got some more Frasier Fridays in the can with Merlin. And we've got some Disney stuff, both with and without Merlin, that I need to put up as well. So all that stuff happening. And I do have another potato chip food fanatics. That's kind of why I guess I had that on the brain in my example. So that's going to post as well. We are now over 300 subscribers, so I can't thank you guys enough for that. That is so cool. I love it, love it, love it. But comment if you haven't, or subscribe if you haven't already. Comment below. Like the video if you don't mind. And that's going to do it. Thank you so much, and I'll see you back here next time. Bye.